Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video, we're going to take a look at Kingsburg. Kingsburg is a dice-based worker placement game. Let's jump right in with the description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, then I'll be back for some closing remarks.
This is Kingsburg, set up for a 3-player game. To set it up, each player takes a personal board and the 3 dice in their color, along with all of the building markers here. They put one of their markers on the 0 space of the scoring track. Turn order is determined randomly, so right now Black's going to go first. And each player puts one marker on the soldier track. All the resources just kind of form a supply along with the +2 tokens. They don't actually count as resources, but there's a supply of them as well. Also, you want to keep the white dice by because anybody during the course of the game may be able to use them. And then you just put the season marker on the first space of the calendar track here and the year marker in year 1. Also, you got to make the enemy deck, and you do that by shuffling all the 1s together. There's many of them, and all the 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s. Pick one secretly and make a stack out of them. That's going to go over here, and you're going to be battling them during the game. And last, you just put the King's Envoy on the King's Envoy space. The game is played over 5 years, as indicated by this marker here, and each year is composed of 8 phases. So we're going to go through those 8 phases now, and you just move this guy along as the different phases happen. The first phase of the game is the King's Aid, and as indicated by this minus sign in a house, whoever has the least buildings gets to take 1 white dice. However, if it's tied, it goes to the player with the least buildings with the least resources. If it's still tied, all the tied players, nobody gets the dice, but all the tied players just get to take 1 resource out of these 3 of their choice. So at the beginning of the game, no one has any buildings or resources, so it's tied. So everybody gets to select 1 resource for themselves. Then we move on to spring. This is spring, summer, and fall, by the way, and they're all going to be played exactly the same way. Those are the productive seasons. Winter is going to be a little different, but we'll get there in a moment. The first thing that happens in productive seasons, all players simultaneously roll all their dice. And then they're going to lay them out, and depending on the totals of the dice, they're going to rearrange their turn order. So let's pretend we had these numbers. Here is a 12, for instance, and here is a 12, and right here is a 16. So we know black is going to be last. It goes lowest to highest in terms of turn order. But since these guys have the same number, they actually stay in the order they were in. And that's going to dictate how you take actions for the rest of the round. So the next thing you do is you place your dice. And you can place them in groups of 1, 2, 3. If you have white dice, you can't place it by yourself, but you could put it with others. You always need at least 1 colored dice. It'd be okay to have 2 white dice and 1 colored dice, but at least 1 colored dice must be present. So in your turn, in turn order, you place a die. So I could place, for instance, this here, and then next green would go. And green could put these 2 together to make an 8, and so on until all the spaces are full. Each space can only hold 1 person's color, so if somebody goes here, nobody else later could go there. I do want to point out there's one change of the rules only in a 2-player game, and that is you roll dice in colors not being used, so let's just pretend white's not being used and black's not being used. So you would roll 3 in one color and 2 in the other, and you would put those out to essentially block certain spaces from being able to be selected, just to kind of make a robot player, because 2 people, there would be a lot of open spaces. So after everybody's placed all their dice, we go through in order from 1 to 18, and anybody who placed the dice there gets that reward. We'll just go over briefly a couple of the symbols. This one here means you get a victory point. This is a soldier, so you move all along the soldier track. This allows you to peek at this card here. It's kind of like this ghost symbol. This is a +2, and this kind of weird one is any good you would like. The regular ones here are just that good, so this would be 4 gold, but here's any good you like, 2 of them, and also a +2 token. So that's something to keep in mind. And whenever you see an arrow after something, that means you have to give that in. So in this one, you pay a point, you move back on the track, but you'll get 3 resources. And this is essentially just trading 1 resource for the other 2 types. There is one important thing to note about these +2s. When you have them, you can play them with your dice to increase this by exactly 2, not 1 or 2 or anything like that, by exactly 2. But you can only use 1 per season. So 1 in the spring, 1 in the summer, and 1 in fall. Even if you have 10 of them, you can only use 1. So you can never put 2 together to add more. So that's just something to be mindful of, but they can be helpful. So after everybody gets help from these advisors, they get whatever the spaces they placed on. The last part of a productive season is to build. And again, it goes in player order. You're allowed to build 1 building. So you either build that building or pass. And you do that on your board here by paying the required number of goods. And those goods are indicated in these circles. And each building has an ability that you'll get if you build it. So you pay those goods to the bank here. You take 1 of your markers and you place it. You always have to build left to right. So I can't start up here even if I'd really like to. I'd have to build this, and before I was able to build that. But otherwise you can build anywhere you like. You don't have to stay in one row or anything along those lines. And every time you build, there's a certain number of victory points. Some are 0, but whenever you build that building, you immediately move up that many victory points. So that's how a productive season works. And then next is this one, and whoever has the most buildings, there's a plus in front of this one to remind you, gets 1 victory point. And anybody tied shares that victory point. So all players could theoretically get it at the same time. Then there's another productive season. And now, right here, the player with the least buildings, again, ties go in favor of the player with the least resources, gets the King's Envoy. And the King's Envoy you can use 1 time, and he essentially breaks a couple rules of the game. For one, you could play him with your guy. So if, for example, there was already some people on 8, and you had these dice here, you could play this together with them to place on a place where somebody else has already influenced. Also, he allows you to build 2 buildings in 1 turn if you choose to use him. But once you use him, he goes back to this space. You can only use him once in either of those 2 ways. If you don't use him, by the time the game comes around to this phase again, he's going to go to the player with the lowest number of buildings. And then here, fall is the last productive season. Again, works the same as the others. And then right here, phase 7, we have an opportunity to increase our military. For every 2 resources you pay of any type, you can add 1 to here. And that goes in turn order, so you can add as many or as few as you'd like. You're certainly allowed to go to 0. And then lastly is winter. There's no production in winter, but instead we flip up the top card of the deck, and it's going to be something like this. And it's going to have a strength value. It reminds you on the back of the card, you know this could be from 2 to 4 in terms of strength. So when this happens, we roll the King's die, doesn't really matter what color, and that's how much the King helps you. So everybody gains that much military. So wherever they are here, plus this, plus the value of different buildings. Like for example, this one here gives you a military, or +1 in battle, it actually says, but that's how it works. So if your total exceeds this number, you get the reward. In this case, 1 stone at the bottom. But if you are less than that, you are going to get punished. If you're exactly the same, nothing happens to you one way or the other, so you just kind of break even. But if you lose, this bad thing happens. And this symbol right here is especially devilish because you lose a building. And when you lose a building, you always lose your most right building. If there's multiple buildings in the same row, you lose your topmost. And when you lose the building, you take off your marker, but you also move back on the score track that many points as that space. So you actually will lose the points. So you got to be careful of those. If you ever lose a resource that you don't have, you don't have to pay. You only have to pay what you need to. But then after the battle, whoever had the highest military and won, if nobody won, nobody gets this bonus, but whoever had the highest military and defeated the beasts that came that turn, they get 1 bonus point. And that can be shared if a bunch of people had the same military value. So then at the end of the round, this shifts down, this goes back here, and unless that was the end of the 5th round, the game continues just like that. At the end of the 5th round, whoever has the most points wins. Let's get going with this playthrough. So the first phase, nobody has the least buildings because everybody has the same amount, and everybody also has the same amount of resources. So no one gets the white die, but everybody gets to take a resource. Yellow's going to take a wood, black's going to take a stone, and green's going to take a wood. And you always have to make sure everybody can see your resources. They are public knowledge. So we move here, so everybody rolls their dice at the same time, and then we calculate the total. So yellow had a 7, green had a 10, and black also had a 7. So because green had a 10, he's definitely going to be last in turn order, but yellow and black are going to stay in the same order. So yellow is going to get to go first, and the first thing yellow is going to do is he's going to put 1 here. So now it's black's turn. Even though black kind of wanted to go there, he cannot now because that space is occupied. So black's going to take his 4 and he's going to go here. And you certainly can use more than 1 dice to go somewhere because that's exactly what green's going to do. He's going to use 6 and a 2 to go in this 8 space. So now it's back to yellow and he has 6 left. So he's going to put that on the 6th space. And for black's turn, he's going to go on the 3 and green is going to go on this 2 here. So now that everybody's placed, we go in order. So we start with 1. So yellow gets a point and he gets his dice back. And then green gets a gold and gets his dice back. And black gets a wood, takes them back. And now black can choose. He either gets a wood or a gold. Black would like a gold, so that's what he's going to take. And now at space 6, yellow can trade 1 resource for any other 2. So he's going to trade this wood and he's going to get the gold and the stone as indicated. So he takes them back. And lastly, green here gets some more gold. So now in turn order, again, starting with yellow, players have the opportunity, if they'd like to build. So yellow is going to build. He's going to pay a gold and a stone because that's what the building he wants to buy costs. And it's worth 1 point. So he's going to move up 1 point. And now he always has +1 in battle. Black's going to build this inn. It costs 1 gold and 1 wood. So he pays them and he marks it. Unfortunately, it's not worth any victory points, but now at the end of summer, he's going to get a +2 tokens. And lastly, green, he's going to pay 1 wood to get the barricade, which is at the bottom of the board here. Everybody's boards are the same. And that gives you +0 in battle, although it is +1 against goblins. And it's not worth any points, but he really wants to build in that row, so he's got to start there. Now that everybody has a chance to build, we move on to phase 3. Whoever has the most buildings gets a point. Everybody built one, so right now it's tied, so everybody gets that point. Then we go to another productive season, and it plays out exactly the same. I also want to point out that if anybody had a white dice from this here, they would not get that white dice here. That white dice only applies to spring. So now we move to here, and both of these players have 2 buildings, but yellow only has 1, so yellow is going to get to take the king's envoy. So he puts that in his area, and he can use that whenever he'd like. So now we move to this phase here, where players in turn order, so black, green, yellow, have the opportunity to buy some more strength. Because it's the first round of the game, I think most of them are feeling pretty good. So black is going to pass, and then green is going to pass, and yellow is going to pass as well. So now we move on to phase 8, in which we flip up the bad guy. And then 1 dice is rolled to add to that total. So everybody adds 5 to their military strength, which coincidentally is enough to take this guy down. So they're all feeling exceptionally good right now. Black's first because he's first in turn order. So this is a goblin. Black gets +1 in battle, +2 in battle. So he has 2 + 5 is 7. So we know black is going to get that stone, and just to make it easy, we'll mark that here. Nobody had any military, but if they already had some on the military track, they would add that as well. So next we got green. He gets 1, 2 as well, so he's also going to be at 7, and he's going to get a stone for doing so. And lastly is yellow. Yellow gets 2 in battle, and plus the 5, so all 3 of them are at 7, and all of them are going to get that stone for being victorious. Now, because they all won and they're all tied, they all get 1 bonus point. Remember, whoever had the highest total and wins gets a bonus point. So now the marker moves down. This goes back to here, and we start another round. Yellow is actually going to get the white dice in this round because he only has 2 buildings and everybody else has 3. So we'd continue like that.
I haven't played base game Kingsburg in a long time. That's because the expansion is so fantastic. There's almost no reason not to play with it. But it was a nice refresher on how great of a game this really is, even in its basic form. It can be a little bit frustrating when people block where you want to go, but there's plenty of time to get them back. Also, there's a lot of mechanics in the game that favor the player who's farther behind, such as getting the white dice at the beginning or the king's envoy that lets you take the same place as somebody else. Anyway, so those type of things make it for a real nice tight game. There's lots of different rows that you can build on, and all of them are reasonably even. You can certainly win by going any way. I'm not going to say that some aren't necessarily better than others, but all of them can make for a competitive game. This is one I really enjoy, and it goes over well with a lot of groups. I actually really like it as a 2-player game, which is a little bit unusual. But this is one I strongly recommend you check out. It's a little bit older of a worker placement game, but it's really neat, and it's definitely tactical in that you're rolling dice and things like that. But it's a lot of fun. It's not probably for the really competitive, serious player, but it is strategic a little bit nonetheless. So this is a good family game and a good medium to lightweight game. That's Kingsburg.